Last week, I ran my very first play session in the Wild Imaginary West RPG, and I have to admit, I need more practice. But all things considered, it went better than I had expected it would, and everyone had fun, I think. The scenario that I had my players go through involved this playable diorama of a mine, and of course, some scary monsters. I'd like the next scenario that I host to be centered around a Western-style shootout with more human enemies, so today I'll be making a new board with that in mind. As I sat in front of this empty canvas with my pencil, I searched my mind palace for different ideas for how to shape the terrain, and nothing came to me. After the planning phase, I moved on to the foam. I hot glued the foam offcuts to the board and shaved away the overhang, allowing the foam shapes to dictate the formation of the landscape. And as I was working on these foam pieces, I realized none of them had been cut at perfect right angles, which is probably something I should take up with whoever was cutting these before. I finally figured out that I wanted this to look like a gully or dried up riverbed, so I stacked on a few more layers. After that, I shaved the offcuts of my offcuts into little boulders that I could place around the board for some variety. Once I had a nice little collection, I glued those in place. I then cleaned up the offcuts of my offcuts of my offcuts and began adding texture to the surface of the foam. Most of this texture is going to be covered up by Sculptamold in just a minute, but now there's a nice grippy surface for the Sculptamold to cling to. After the Dremel, I used a torch to add a little bit more subtle variation, and the next step was to add that Sculptamold. After mixing it up, I spread it over the base, trying to give more subtle transitions between the layers of foam, and give it a more organic, earthy appearance to paint on top of. After the Sculptamold was in all of the places that I wanted it, I covered up and protected the rest of the remaining foam surfaces with Mod Podge. I then left that to dry manually, and then it was time to break out the bits boxes because we were going to be doing some kit bashing. Some of the content I enjoy watching the most on YouTube are terrain builds for war games made from old toys and junk from thrift stores or dollar stores. Eric's Hobby Workshop and Scratch Bashing are two of my go-tos for that. And that style lends itself more towards a mechanical look, and my Wild Imaginary West is not perfectly suited for that, but this build was a nice excuse to be able to use up some of the things that I've collected over the years. Aside from repurposed plastic, the majority of this build is going to be balsa wood. While I didn't necessarily make a plan for this build, I knew that I had to keep a few things in mind to make it playable. For one, I wanted there to be a linear path that could be followed, which will include fun storytelling elements to integrate into whatever scenario I come up with for my players. Secondly, unlike a diorama, the pathway needs to be walkable for the minis who are on a base. Minis have to be able to stand on the platforms and walk ways easily without too much risk of falling off. There's obviously some risk of them falling off always, but I didn't want to risk damaging them any more than is to be expected during a normal tabletop gaming experience. Another element of playability is durability. During the first game I hosted, one of the players, I won't mention his name, nearly broke the board twice. He also ran and hid when his friend was being attacked by a giant owl. But that's neither here nor there. A nice thing about a more story-based game board is that the sides of the board don't necessarily need to be balanced for combat. There are enough flat areas for movable scatter terrain like barrels and crates, which will help keep the players on the ground safe and give them some cover, but it also provides a nice challenge. Just like you see me here constructing this board without any planning whatsoever, that's the essence of life in the Wild Imaginary West. Nobody's out here checking the safety standards to make sure things are to code. People just build what they want to. The feel of the Wild Imaginary West is kit bashed. So when the game comes out and you build your own terrain like this, you can do whatever you want. As of recording this audio, I obviously have not read any of the comments, but I'm fairly certain that at this point in the video, I have at least 3 comments asking why my voice sounds different, or am I sick, or I sound tired. And thank you for your concern. It's been a month and I still have some lingering congestion, if you need to know. But I'm also taking this as an opportunity to train my voice, so that maybe someday I can voice one of those Dodge Ram commercials, which will also make me a better narrator of my RPG. I just have to work on my Western accent a little bit. And now that I'm thinking about it, what better place to practice than right here for the remainder of this video? No way, man. I'm just kidding. I'm not going to do that. I won't subject you to it. After a few more details like the railing and the force stall, I felt like the permanent structure was done. Everything else that needs to be added can be added later as scatter terrain. I cleaned up my workstation and threw some basing mix over the ground. I followed that with isopropyl alcohol and watered down white glue. After letting that dry for a few hours, I took it outside to prime. I started with a base coat of sandy yellow, followed by a spritzing from the top with pure white. And while I paint this thing, I'd like to give a huge shout out to all of my patrons. This board can and should hopefully be used for more than one play session in the Wild Imaginary West, taking on many different stories. One potential story for it that I thought of could go like this. Near the town of Bluff, Utah, there's a gang of outlaws who've constructed an extremely large four-stall tower to protect their territory. The outlaws, with no regard for anyone else in the area, are using their tower to indiscriminately scare away everything from its habitat, both big and small, which is a tangible threat to the well-being of the other humans in the region who live off trapping and hunting. The unspoken but very much enforced rule of the West is that you don't mess with other people's business or lives. And this oversized tower is definitely messing with other people's business and lives. As your party rides through the town of Bluff, you're approached by the town's sheepish sheriff, who asks you if you'd be willing to persuade the outlaws to shut down their tower, or at least limit its range. They might be more willing to listen to reason if that reason was accompanied by bigger guns, such as yours. After painting everything with a shade of brown, I covered the ground with 3 more powderized shades of brown, which I sealed and activated with isopropyl alcohol. The last step in the painting process was to add a nice warm white highlight color to all the upward-facing surfaces, and then stipple on some metallic gunmetal on all the metallic faces. The last thing that I had to do before I could play a game on this thing was to paint the sides of this Playable diorama with black 4.0. And after that, I called it good. That is it for this video. Thank you all so much for watching. Hope you enjoyed. Huge shout out as always to my patrons. You guys are the best. Have an awesome week, everyone. I'll see you next time.